week 17 of the fantasy football season. And if you made this championship in your leagues, congratulations. And hopefully you pull it out this weekend. And here's a few tight ends I would start this week. So time of recording this video, none of these players have been placed on the safety or protocol list. The first guy, Rob Gronkowski of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Rob Gronkowski's still a top 5 tight end, in my opinion here. And he goes out there and makes plays. In the last couple weeks, I know it hasn't been good fantasy days for him or Tom Brady, but this week here with a great matchup at the New York Jets that give up the 9th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. We know Gronk throughout his career with the Patriots had monster games versus the Jets, and I think he does it once again in MetLife Stadium in Week 17. So the last few weeks here for Gronk, Week 14 versus the Buffalo Bills, 5 catches, 62 yards. Week 15 versus New Orleans, 2 catches, 29 yards. And then last week, a puzzling ball game, 1 catch for 23 yards, but it was mostly the running game and the defense that did the damage for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But right here, we're not going to see Mike Evans in this one. He's on the protocol list. Chris Godwin, he's out for the season. And Antonio Brown, he looked good last week, no doubt about it. But I think the targets are going to be majority Antonio Brown and Gronk this week. And this Jet defense is going to have no answer for him. And I think Gronk in this one has a big ball game where he could find the end zone possibly twice. The next tight end I would start this week's Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. So what a find he's been this season here for the Bills, even though he's been on the roster the last couple of years. But it's been his breakout season, and he's been one of the better pickups this whole season for fantasy football owners. A few games here for Dawson Knox. Week 14 at Tampa, 7 catches, 60 yards and a touch. Week 15 versus Carolina, 4 catches, 38 yards. And Week 16 at the Patriots, 2 catches, 11 yards, but he found the end zone once again. So right here, good matchup in Week 17 versus Atlanta that we know can't stop anyone. The Lions offense went up for pretty big yards in that one, even though they lost the ball game. And I think Dawson Knox once again finds the end zone in this one and gets 40 or 50 yards. And he's a tight end you start pretty much each and every week. The next tight end's another tight end who's been a breakout star this year. Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So Schultz here, he does have a tough matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals that give up the second least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But Dalton Schultz, in my opinion, he's pretty much matchup proof after the numbers he's been putting up over the last few weeks. Week 14 at Washington, it was a bad game, no doubt about it, 1 catch, 4 yards. Week 15 at the Giants, 8 catches, 67 yards, a touchdown. And then last week he returned the favor versus Washington, 8 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. So right now, him and Dak Prescott have a great rapport. In my opinion, he's number 1 or number 2 option in this Cowboy offense in terms of targets and touchdowns over the last few weeks. Amari Cooper, he finally did some work offensively. And CeeDee Lamb, he hasn't had the huge breakout year like many people thought, even though he's still had a solid year. But Dalton Schultz has been great, and you got to play him this week. And I think he could have a decent game, even though he has a tough matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals. The next tight end is Tyler Hibee of the Los Angeles Rams. So Tyler Hibee, a good matchup this week at the Ravens that give up the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So over the last few games here for Hibee, hasn't been all that great, and he's missed some time as well on the protocol list. So Week 13 versus Jacksonville, 5 catches, 48 yards. And then last week, Week 16 in Minnesota, 5 catches, 41 yards. But this week here, I'm going with the matchup on paper, 5th most points to tight ends. Obviously, all the defenses, they're going to double or even triple team at times Cooper Kupp in this offense. And that's going to leave the middle of the field and the red zone area for a big target like Tyler Higbee to have some space and make some plays. So I think in this game, for PPR owners, I could see Higbee score anywhere from 8 to 11 points. And at a weak tight end position, once again this season, I think that's a solid number to put up. So he's a tight end I would start with a good matchup, and he plays in a good offense. And the 5th and final tight end I would start this week, Gerald Everett of the Seattle Seahawks. So Everett here the last few weeks, he's emerged as a great tight end option for fantasy owners, and also a guy I mentioned to add onto the waiver wire coming into the week. So the last few games here for Everett, Week 14 at Houston, 13 rushing yards, 2 catches, 15 yards, a touchdown. Week 15 at the Rams, 4 catches, 60 yards. And then Week 16 versus Chicago, 4 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. What a great matchup versus Detroit this week here. I like a lot of Seattle Seahawks. I think the Seahawks have one of their better offensive days the whole season. And the Lions give up the 10th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So right now, with all the attention rolled to DK Metcalf And Tyler Lockett, it's given Everett opportunities in the middle of the field and the red zone to make some plays. And once again this week here, I think he'll hit double-digit fantasy points. So that's a few tight ends I would start here for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.